Okay, I'll make that 2 o'clock. So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Wimpole Street for those attending in person today, and welcome to the Network Rail EIT RCM competition for all those out there in cyberspace listening to the webinar. Good afternoon. My name is David Clarke. I'm the director of the Enabling Innovation team, and we're working with Network Rail to run this competition. Today is a bit of briefing, so it's an opportunity for us to tell you a little bit about the aims and objectives of the programme, but also, most importantly, it's an opportunity for you to ask us questions. But if I could ask you to hold your questions to the end so that it gives equal opportunity for those on the webinar, and we will give as much time as we need to questions at the end. So without any further ado, I'll give you a little bit of a introduction. This is the agenda for today. I think I've just done the introductions, a little bit about the Enabling Innovation team. Then I'll hand over to Richard Dugdale from Network Rail to take you through the 10 challenges and give you some background and some illustrations as to why the challenges are what they are, why they're important to the railway. Richard will also tell you about the series of engagement events that we've got organised to give access to the railway for those who are perhaps less familiar with it. Richard will then hand back to me, and I'll go through a little bit of about the ITT process, and then we'll come to the most important bit, the questions at the end. I've introduced myself and Richard. Our colleague Peter Talbot, our commercial manager, is unfortunately unwell today, but he's joining on the webinar. If we have any deeply commercial questions that we can't deal with, Richard and I, today, then we'll take a note of those and we'll deal with those in correspondence. So, little bit of background. Where does all this originate from? This originates from a thing called the Technical Strategy Leadership Group, and their document, the Rail Technical Strategy, which is the document you see on the screen. The group of logos are the logos of the members of the Technical Strategy Leadership Group. So as you'll see, it covers pretty much all of rail, not just heavy rail, but also light rail, Transport for London, Crossrail, etc. If I was to sum up the Rail Technical Strategy in 4 words, it's those 4 C's. It's reduce cost and carbon, and it's increase capacity and customer satisfaction. And in amongst all of that, particularly around the customer satisfaction, is improving reliability. And what remote condition monitoring is all about is helping us improve reliability. Where does all this fit into the landscape? It's part of what we're terming the Future Railway family. The Future Railway family is TSLG's group of activities. They're illustrated on this snapshot of the Future Railway website on the left. So there's TSLG itself, the governance group, the committee if you like. There's the strategic research they do in the green. There's the Rail Technical Strategy, and there's the Enabling Innovation team, which is my team and the team that's launching this project today. Those of you who have read the documentation closely will have noticed that the contract is with RSSB. That's because RSSB are, if you like, our parent body. They host the Future Railway activities, and they are the contracting authority. So my staff and I are RSSB employees, but if you like, we are trading as the Enabling Innovation team. So what's the Enabling Innovation teams all about? It's a cross-industry team. Its job is to try and match the longer-term business challenges, the kind of challenges identified in the Rail Technical Strategy, to innovative solutions, and that's where you in the room and out in the webinar come in. We're looking for your innovative RCM solutions, and where necessary to provide funding, because what we're trying to do is plug a thing that we've termed the innovation gap. And where we want to start, we want to start with those challenges. We want to start at the top of the triangle by understanding what the challenges are, running processes, typically competitions like the RCM competition, to identify the people with the best ideas to address the challenges, and where necessary, supporting those with funding to make the things that might otherwise not happen. And what we're trying to do is bridge that innovation gap that I mentioned. This would be typical, this would be familiar to any industry. It's the scenario where you do a little bit of research, you get to the end of that phase, to the end of the lab phase, you have perhaps a proof of concept, but then the order of magnitude cost to go on to the next stage is many times the multiple of what you've already spent. Long before you were certain, long before you've done the prototype or demonstrator and satisfied yourself that it's going to work. So that's difficult in any industry, but it's particularly difficult in the rail industry because we have a lot of players in the rail industry. They have different time horizons. They have different levels of funding. Simply getting an agreement to progress something is challenging with the number of players. So if it's challenging anywhere, it's particularly challenging in the rail industry. And that's where my team come in. That's why we're funded to try and bridge that innovation gap and help you innovators bridge that innovation gap. I've already mentioned the rail technical strategy. If you want to know more, then it's on our website. But I'd also draw your attention to its daughter document, for want of a better expression. What Network Rail have done is they've taken the rail technical strategy and they've looked at their activities, and they have written a Network Rail technical strategy that sits under the rail technical strategy that is their part of taking it forward, and that's highly pertinent to the RCM challenge. And that document, the one at the bottom right there, is available on Network Rail's website. So what I'll do now is I'll hand over to Richard Dugdale from Network Rail, who will take you through the 10 challenges. Richard.
Thank you, David. And while David has been talking, we've had welcome interaction over the web. So thank you, Graham Burden, who's highlighted that the sound is coming through loud and clear on the web, and we're gratified that we've got a response in. So the communication is working both ways. Just to amplify a little what David said about the triangle and the modus operandi of the Enabling Innovation team, the remote condition monitoring workstream, part of the AIT, has actually fulfilled, or is to fulfill, those three ambitions. So the 10 challenges that I'm going to describe have business problems behind them. Many of the people in the room, many of the people logging into the webinar have contributed and attended a number of events earlier in the year where we've worked across the supply industry with people in Network Rail, South West Trains, the Wessex Alliance, academics, maintainers, to define some business problems that would be appropriate for remote condition monitoring. Some that already have RCM, where we could perhaps be more systematic and widespread, and some that don't currently see a lot of remote condition monitoring. So we've boiled it down to 10 challenges which are of real value to the business. We invite supplier community, academics to bring solutions to it, and as I say, I'll try and bring out that these will be of benefit to the rail industry as well. So we're about promoting innovative ways of using RCM to improve rail safety, and also punctuality. And punctuality is a good proxy, a good measurement, if you like, of the impact that things that damage the rail business cause, and I'll try and bring that out. Now, in terms of the challenges, I'll talk through the individual 10 challenges one at a time. We have them laid out here 1 to 10, and we've regrouped them from the 16 we started with to the 10 which are now out to competition after a sift and a filter and a check for duplication. The first two are what we would call the thought layer. So these are very much analysis work streams and looking at data and looking at alerts and alarms. The next layer are almost like surveillance of flooding and trespass, and that's a monitoring layer. And then the final challenges are much more tactical, demonstrator physical solutions relating to things like signalling and telecommunications and the permanent way. And they involve demonstrator projects which will put widgets out on the infrastructure. So challenge number one of the analysis projects, sets out how to reduce operational incidents by analysis of data sets, leading to near real-time analysis of data sets and linking bits of data which may, on the face of it, not be related. On the screen I'm showing the sort of tens and hundreds of thousands of minutes of delay are caused annually to South West trains, just one train operator on one bit of geography. That doesn't show necessarily the full reactionary effect of delays across the network, and as I say, it only shows one train operator, so it is a small microcosm of the delays out there. But when we consider the cost to the industry, each of those minutes delay may be affecting 100, 200, 300 people. In terms of the societal impact of delay, these are very big impacts, and anything we can do to mitigate them are of value, and we can monetize them as well. So we know that we will have a handful of demonstrator projects at the end of it, but I'd point that something that is of benefit may actually spiral out of the programme and run as a national rollout on its own merits. That would be a great scenario if actually some really brilliant projects spiraled out of the programme. Second work stream is using the data we know, and perhaps at the moment the data we don't, but will come out of the analysis work stream, how to calibrate the current intelligent infrastructure system, the fault monitoring system, to give us the level of alerts and alarms and almost prediction of things that will go wrong and that might hurt us. The screen is showing a couple of things. With his permission, we have a fault controller on the screen, Roy Cooper, our intelligent infrastructure manager for Wessex. And behind the backdrop is the simple dashboard showing, for example, a track circuit on Wessex and the level that the system is calibrated at. The idea behind this work stream is to provide various levels of intelligence to the people using it. In day-to-day operations, to set the alerts and alarms at a level that is just right for the response. Not so many alarms that the controllers are overwhelmed, and not so light on the alarms that we're actually missing vital stuff. And then there are secondary levels of alerts and alarms for maintenance prediction, something that is approaching a level of failure, and maybe a tertiary level of alerts and alarms for post-event analysis and for trending data and sort of predictive and scheduling maintenance going forward. Then we come to our monitoring layer, and the third challenge is how to detect and prevent potential safety risks using high-definition visibility of the network. There's a wealth of technologies that we could possibly use, but for the purposes of this challenge, we're actually confining ourselves to the existing capture of data from the forward and rear-facing CCTV on a number, the majority of the fleet. And the challenge we're setting is to use that technology to measure a couple of things. The first thing being the movement of trees and vegetation from their reference position, which I guess has come highly relevant in the last few weeks following foul weather, and also to detect the presence of unauthorized persons on the infrastructure. And this may be by some sort of post-processing of the data, but using the existing footage that we've got better. And this may then lead to other technologies, other means of detecting these things. And also, once we've proven the two things of vegetation and people, extending it to other things that might be of interest, which might be boundary fences, it might be disturbed signalling equipment, etc. Challenge number 4 is in relation to flooding. Now, the photo, a rather spectacular example, and one that couldn't probably be mitigated by remote control monitoring, remote condition monitoring in the Exeter area, and pointing out that even over 100 years ago, the same location had the same problems. This is looking at areas on Wessex where we might be able to avert the closure of the railway by an earlier intervention, by a quicker response with the monitoring giving us the warning before so that we can respond in better time, and also bringing back the time at which we can recover services as well. So it would shorten some flooding incidents, and it might actually prevent and avert some other incidents which would otherwise result in a closure of the line. Again, a monitoring challenge number 5, and this is how to secure the railway boundaries and monitor access gates. In contrast to the monitoring the infrastructure previous challenge, which is a large amount of infrastructure and monitored by trains, this is the precision surveillance of a valuable piece of infrastructure. We're using Bournemouth Train Care Depot as our host site. It is of value because trains and equipment and materials are stabled there. The photo shows a Class 450 unit which was tagged with graffiti just 2 weeks ago. And the challenge owner, the depot manager at Bournemouth, is a very interested and willing participant in the trial and would be delighted to see if we could get any improvement in the level of security that we have at that depot. Again, that would be worthy of rollout to wider infrastructure once we had proven the technology for this valuable site. Challenge 6, and now we come into the physical demonstrator projects and equipment to be put on the infrastructure. How to detect voids and the speed at which they're deteriorating. The photo simplifies and exaggerates the problem. This is not the typical void that we would get on South West Railway geography, but illustrates movement of ballast underneath the sleeper. The challenge relates to voiding underneath sleepers of the ballast under complex switches and crossings. By and large, plain line, open railway is monitored, is measured, and can be intervened. Our problems come with holding the track geometry underneath complex crossings, and the idea is for some sort of monitoring to pinpoint when movement starts to place and exactly where it is, so that the intervention when it takes place is quick, it's precise, and it doesn't need to be repeated, so that the whole system then holds up and is in balance with itself and with other components of the system. Challenge 7 relates to the rail. This is how to achieve a validated system that measures rail condition, in particular in relation to cracking, and again in particular relation to crossings, points and crossings, rather than plain line railway. The intention here is to measure the fixed cast crossings which are a part of the switch and crossing system. The photo illustrates one on the Guildford area, which has been rather brutally marked up in chalk, and then on the right-hand pane, if you can see on the slide, the evidence of a fairly significant crack has come in there. Before we get to that stage, these cracks are quite difficult to identify by conventional means, and we're looking for a means of measuring on a repeatable basis and a wide system basis the onset of the start of fatigue and cracking in these cast manganese crossings. As a non-engineer, a cast manganese crossing sounds to me like a fairly niche piece of equipment, but it is in fact the standard rail crossing. 20,000 population across the rail network nationally, so a big prize to go at. Challenge 8 is about warning of bank failure, either on cuttings or on embankments, how to systematically warn early of movement of embankments or cuttings. This is an area of concern to the industry. In the last calendar year, I guess because of wet conditions, there were 6 derailment-causing earth slips across the national network. The one illustrated is a spectacular one and an unusual and almost a one-off one, the failure of a mine dump at Hatfield Colliery in South Yorkshire, which closed the railway for a considerable time. Morphological terms, a classic rotational slump shear collapse, and that's what we face in other parts of the network as well. So an example in Loch-Treeg area, the West Highland line, locomotive derailed, which in the end has had to be cut up and retrieved from site in bits. And Wessex has its own problem areas. A couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago, in Gillingham Tunnel. The area of geography that we're selecting is the section of line between Salisbury and Exeter, which has an infrequent, fairly fast service and is prone to slope collapses because of the varying types of geology that section of railway cuts through. Challenge 9 is again about widgets and demonstrators on the infrastructure and the perennial problem of how to achieve improvements in track circuit reliability. The prize is hundreds of thousands of minutes delay saved nationally. Signalling policy is to mix new installations either with track circuits or axle counters, but for many years to come we will have a sizable population of track circuits which will require maintaining, which will be a source of delay, and so there is value in trying to find solutions to the whole population of track circuits that remain. Unlike points, track circuits have an unpredictable and disproportionate failure rate. The example would be for points failures, 20% of the points might cause a much higher proportion, maybe 80% of the delays. For track circuits, 20% of the track circuits cause 20% of the delays. So the real value in putting instrumentation and monitoring track circuits is really in covering the whole lot, the whole population. The track circuit challenge is a two-parter. The first part is almost to create a model of the whole track circuit system. The ballast, the block joints, the relays, the conductivity of the rail, the fastenings, and to be able to test that and use that virtual model to see the effects on the system of changes to it and benefits by changing components and so forth. The second part is to replicate the existing intelligent infrastructure systems and voltage loss across track circuits, but in a much cheaper way and a systematic way, so that we could afford to put monitoring across pretty much every track circuit across the whole population across the country. The final one is a pure conventional engineering challenge, and this is in relation to achieving improvements in signalling power reliability. Again, we will have a legacy set of installations across Wessex and the national network for many decades to come. The challenge is not so much with new installations, which bring their own remote condition monitoring and self-healing and reconfigurability for free. It's about the dwindling but significantly large population of old 650 volt power supplies, and how to achieve some centralized fault passage indication in a better way than currently, to speed response times and to speed the response ability to focus straight in on the area of the problem without going from location to location to boil the problem down to a particular spot. I'll conclude the challenge slides with a human factor. I talked in terms of minutes delay and in terms of costs. The human factor is the sheer chaos that a significant incident like a power failure or big track circuit failures or a crack crossing do to the train service. And I guess the evening peak at Waterloo Station with some piece of infrastructure or some blockage is no better exposition of the damage and the difficulty and the delay it causes to people and to society and to goods moving around the network. I'll now turn to the engagement events that we have planned as part of the support in the information process to inform the tendering process in the run-up to the bids coming in after Christmas. As well as this event today, the briefing event and webinar, we will be holding a day-to-day at Network Rail's headquarters at Milton Keynes, the Quadrant. The format of that day will relate particularly to the analysis challenges 1 and 2, format being a central brief, bidders, participants, supporters to come in, interact with each other, understand the terms of the competition and some of the facts. Presentations from owners of data from 3 areas, being the intelligent infrastructure workstream, from the real-time control and performance analysis, and then the asset information function and what information we already get in from train-borne examination from the infrastructure, and then rotating groups of say 10 going around the different functions, a brief on the data hold and requirement and capture from each of those, and then discussions with practitioners at the desks in the building. That's on the 28th of November in Milton Keynes. Then we have a series of what I'd call hands-on or kick the track days. These are for the challenges 6, 7 and 9, so relating to voids under the rail, under the track, to cracking in cast crossings, and then the track circuit challenge. These to be held at 3 of the new Network Rail training centres, the first event being tomorrow, the 15th at Walsall. These are an ideal opportunity, particularly for smaller businesses and those new to the rail sector, to crawl around the physical infrastructure, to see the different types of points, to see the layout of crossings which are laid in a dry, safe hangar environment, and to look at examples of some of the things we're looking at. So the voiding under sleeper and examples of cracked crossings and things to start to look at. Given by technical practitioners as well as with the other events, an introductory brief to the whole programme. Those dates being tomorrow, the 15th at Walsall, the 22nd at close to Bristol Parkway Station, and then the 9th of December at Paddock Wood in Kent. We may run others depending on demand. There is a comment about protective clothing. We don't need full orange as in the photograph, but certainly if bidders could bring hard hat, high visibility equipment and steel toe capped laced boots and not rigger boots, that would be appreciated. Those are the dates and some views of the centres. Only the need to attend one of these Kick the Track days. The content will be the same. The presenters will vary. The message is that we are conveying facts here, and that inevitably questions will arise, but I'd encourage bidders to make formal questions through the website, and these will be logged for consistency. So really only at these events to take away the facts as portrayed rather than any opinion or sentiment or potential solutions that are already out there. So these are confined to the facts of the infrastructure and the facts of the challenges that we have. Then we have a series of site visits. 21st of November sees a visit to Bournemouth Depot to talk about the challenges of keeping that area secure and the sort of business loss control that we get, the sort of issues of theft, graffiti, vandalism, so forth, at a typical train care depot. And then at the Basingstoke site, a couple of smaller visits to the infrastructure fault control and seeing the logging of incidents and the inputs from the intelligent infrastructure system with Roy Cooper, the flight controller, the intelligent infrastructure manager for Wessex. And again, we have repeats of other events if the demand exists, and depending on demand, and already the events are starting to fill up quite nicely, so a very welcome amount of interest and participation coming.
Thank you, Richard. So we now want to take you through a little bit about the tender approach and process. But before we do, if I could say particularly to those on the webinar, start thinking about your questions and typing them in now, because that will give you a bit of a head start, and we can then deal with those as they're coming up on the screen at this end. Can I also just add to what Richard was saying about the various engagement events that we've got organised? One of the things that we hope you'll get out of that is the ability to potentially network and with others that are interested in this programme, because we envisage there may be some potential collaborations out there. We are thinking about whether or not we should run some more dedicated collaboration event or put up some kind of collaboration facility. So if I can just put out there the question that if you think that would be valuable, then please let us know, and we will think about the best way to do that. But we are keen to see good proposals, and good proposals are often putting together a number of people with slightly different approaches and ideas to get the best offer. Just to go back to what Richard was saying, I think it's worth emphasising that this, I would suggest, is a great opportunity for the supply chain. You've got, I would suggest, unprecedented access to Network Rail, unprecedented support from South West Trains. Half the funding is coming from Network Rail and South West Trains. That's the level of support. Every one of those problems has an individual problem owner on the South West Trains Network Rail Alliance. You've seen the range of days and access to people and facilities that are available to you. That sort of opportunity doesn't come along every day. I would really, really encourage you to use that. Even if you're not yet sure whether you know how you'd respond to this, I'd suggest you've got nothing to lose by engaging and finding out more, because you might just have that light bulb moment when you're at the day-to-day or at one of the training centres or one of the other facilities that have been offered. I really would emphasise that I would applaud Network Rail and South West Trains for the effort that they're putting into this, and that is an illustration of how the value that they put on addressing these challenges. The other thing that's probably worth saying, you'll probably all be aware that Network Rail's mantra is to move to a situation where they're managing their assets on the basis of monitoring the assets and intervening before they fail, etc. And you'll also probably all be aware that there's a thing called the Intelligent Infrastructure Programme. We have worked closely with that programme to make sure that we're not doing anything that they're doing, and we're going beyond that, and we're addressing the areas that they are not yet addressing. So at the risk of stating the obvious, if you are successful in putting forward your feasibility or demonstration proposal and you get shortlisted and you run a feasibility or a demonstration, then the opportunity is there to create a pull for a new market almost, because these are problems that are not currently being addressed. And as I've already articulated, South West Trains as a pilot area for Network Rail are very strongly behind this, and if it works for them, then it should work anywhere on the network. So please grasp those opportunities. Moving on then to the process, there is 10 challenges which Richard's very ably outlined. You can submit a proposal for one challenge, 2 challenges, 10 challenges if you wish. But what we would say is if you're submitting for more than one challenge, we would expect you to provide us a dedicated submission for each of the challenges that you're submitting for. The proposals are either for a feasibility study that may follow on to a demonstration project, in which case we ask you for a contractable offer for the feasibility study and an indicative offer for the demonstration part of the project that would follow on from the feasibility. And those are for the challenges listed there, 1, 2, 4, 7, 8 and 9. Or there are others which we think are amenable to going straight to a demonstrator, and those are 3, 5, 6 and 10, and in that case we'd ask you to propose your approach to a demonstrator and make us an offer that we could contract on. Our feel for the level of funding that we would attach to those 2 approaches are feasibility studies in the quite small 10k up to perhaps 100k range, and for the demonstrator projects 50 to up to as perhaps if the prospect of success is there, perhaps up to 500k for a demonstrator. The solutions must be deliverable within the Network Rail South West Trains Alliance, because that's the area that we're working in. We think that's pretty representative of all of Network Rail's infrastructure, with the possible exception of it doesn't have overhead 25,000 volt overhead electric line, but other than that it's pretty representative. Our approach in terms of funding is that between the Enabling Innovation team and Network Rail, we envisage a budget of up to £3 million, and we expect for the Enabling Innovation team and Network Rail to participate roughly 45% each, and we are looking for the supplier who, in cash or kind, put up 10%, a minimum of 10%. You'll see in the ITT that if you put up more than 10%, then that will weigh in your favour as part of the evaluation, but we're looking for you to demonstrate some commitment to this process. As I've said, I think we're giving a pretty attractive opportunity to you, and we'd like to see you showing that you recognise that by putting some collateral in cash or kind into it. There's a note there at the bottom about our normal approach to IP, intellectual property. We expect typically the innovator to the supplier to retain the intellectual property rights. We may wish to have a conversation with you about perhaps a royalty return on our investment, and that should be a win-win, because if you're paying us a royalty, you're making sales. And why would you want to offer us a royalty? Well, you'd want us to offer us a royalty because we're treating this as an investment, and if we're treating this as an investment rather than just a one-off grant, we're as interested in getting your product to market as you are. So I hope you'll see that as a positive. Timescales. In terms of submitting the tender, by the fact you're here today, I suspect you've probably already requested an ITT document, but that offer is open to everybody to request the ITT document. By doing that, we're aware of who's interested, but we would like you, please, to indicate by the 30th of November whether you intend to submit a tender or not, and that's to help us plan our evaluation. Because you'll appreciate that understanding the rough volume of interest is important to us to make sure that we run a slick and effective evaluation process. and evaluation means people, and we need the right people. So be great if we had a very high level of interest. We'd really like that, but we'll have to resource accordingly. So we'd like you to let us know no later than the 30th of November if that's the case. Having said that, for clarity, anybody that comes across this competition between the 30th and the closing date of the 17th of December can still enter, but they'll have to tell us by return, or in practice 2 days, that they intend to submit a tender. So please, can you start to register your interest in attending the engagement events? That's all about us planning the logistics. Clearly, any of those events might have a finite limit on capacity. As Richard's already said, if we have a huge demand, we'll look to run more. We want to treat all bidders equally, but you've got to put yourself forward in order to get involved in that. So I really would appeal to you to get your interest in for any of those events that you want to attend. You may at any time submit some clarification questions, and we'll have a question and answer session in a moment. The questions that we deal with today, we will record and write up and put out as for the record. But if you want to ask a clarification at any point, you can do so up until 5 p.m. on the 7th of January. If you ask a clarification question, we will consider whether that is something that would be relevant to all bidders, and we will, where appropriate, broadcast it to all bidders. Indeed, I think our practice will be to submit to make all bidders aware of all clarifications. The closing date for the tender is the 17th of January at 5 p.m. and the timings, the 5 p.m.s are just clarifications on the ITT. The ITT, I think, only says the date at the moment, but we're setting it at 5 p.m. and that will be a clarification that we'll issue presently. And you will need to submit it in accordance with Annex B of the ITT, which is the questionnaire. Our process for assessment will be, we will use a panel comprised of representatives from the Enabling Innovation team, from Network Rail, from South West Trains Alliance, and also external independent assessors bringing in other skills. Our first thing to do will be to check for compliance, so please make sure that your bid is compliant. Please follow the instructions. We'll then score those compliant tenders, and you can see in Annex B the weighting of the scoring. We will then rank the tenders both for each of the 10 questions and also across the whole competition. And we will look to select a balanced portfolio of preferred tenders. We will then enter into a process of due diligence and indeed dialogue, likely as not, with the preferred tenderers, and duly award contracts. And I think on the next slide there's some timescales to that. So having received the bids on the 17th, basically January is the assessment process, ending around the 7th of February. We'll then enter into that clarification and due diligence process. So if you've made it that far, we may well invite you in for a discussion to better understand your proposal and clarify any issues. And we will aim to make a decision by the 5th of March to award by the 31st of March. And that brings us to the questions. So I'm going to take my seat again. Could I just say that anybody that wants to ask a question in the room, we'll bring a mic round so that that people out on the webinar can hear the question directly, so that they understand what it is we're answering.
Hi, Richard Shaw from Hemasala. It's a question on process really for the engagement days. You say the first one is tomorrow. I did send an email back requesting to attend that. I've had nothing back from you, so can we request as potential tenderers that you communicate back that these things, making the guy available now for tomorrow will be quite difficult.
Could we give Aideen a mic?
I have one here, thank you.
Would you like to respond to that, please, Aideen?
Yes, we've gone through all of the requests, and you should have had an email back from us by now. If you have not received any, then I will come and personally speak to you and see what's happened to that.
Okay,
My
thanks.
apologies for that.
And if at the end of this meeting, if there's anybody in the room or indeed online that's in the same situation, if we can please know before we leave the room, as it were. I'm just, if I can go to one of the web questions, we've got a question from Rob Pinnock of TRW about the collaboration facilitation. Right, okay. Rob's supporting the idea of a collaboration facilitation event, so we'll take that into consideration. And he's also asking if we can get copies of the slides shown in the meeting. And the plan is that we will upload the entire webinar as an offline event, so you will be able to go to our website in the next couple of days and see the whole audio-visual experience that you've had today. Okay, I know we've got some more questions in the audience. Mary, do you want to?
Thanks. Can I just say the idea of a collaboration day would be excellent? Can I just start with that? My question is about Challenge 8, one of the areas we have interest in that. There was no mention of that for engagement days on your list, Richard. We did have an email about it being Walsall with the other ones and referring it's adding on to 6, 7 and 9. But A, we haven't mentioned it today, and B, it's an indoor thing, and particularly a lot of Challenge 8 is about external to do with embankments and cuttings. What can you advise us to actually get that sort of engagement at that sort of level for that sort of scenario, and who should be engaged with?
Yes, okay, I'll just check I can be heard on the microphone. Challenge 8 is the challenge relating to structures failure, so this is bank slips, cuttings, etc. We considered the idea of going to visit a bank slip site, and we actually discounted it on a couple of grounds. The first being that site access might be difficult and it might slightly prejudice some people without personal track safety and so forth. Actually, it might be just a little bit boring, to be honest, going to look at a cutting slope. What I'd suggest is that there are some, we'll break it into three. The first element being the history of delays that we've got and the pattern that we've got and the data record that we've got. So the data day certainly should be of some value in terms of control and performance, response to bank slips, closure of the railway and the historic record. And also we have attached some data sets to the ITT, so definitely highlight the delay record out of Trust and Paladin, which has got a historic record of the events that have taken place and would enable some clustering and pinpointing of locations. Likewise, we've put some fault monitoring data out, records from the fault log, which will also give reports from drivers stopping, ringing in, and then their line closed as a result of the events. The second part of it is just the physical attributes of slope failure, and I'd suggest for that there are plenty of examples away from the railway environment, actively moving slopes, coastal settings and so forth. Actually not far away from the Salisbury to Exeter event, the whole coastline is susceptible to failure, so a geomorphological process is going on there. And then the third element to it is the potential detection system, and I think I'd point to the data day and also the Basingstoke visits with intelligent infrastructure to look at how the data that we would get from some potential slope monitoring or remote monitoring of slopes would then feed into the intelligent infrastructure system and the protocols to get that information into the sort of mainstream and so forth. So I hope I've answered the question that we had considered a site visit, but probably it's best covered at each end through the data and the historic record, and then in terms of the physical attributes by looking at sites off the railway, which we wouldn't provide.
Thanks. Concerning the data day, will the data day have the facility or give the facility or have the ability to show what you do on a bi-directional basis with the data? It's okay having the data coming in, it's how you want it to go out to maybe field engineers and the likes as well. Is that going to be part of that day too?
Yes, it is. Thank you for the question. And this is a very awash with data, and in some cases perhaps can not act on it simply because of the sheer volume of it. So I think I would answer in two ways. The first being that the data, or the challenge that looks at linking unrelated bits of data, would be a valuable one in enabling a sift of the meaningful causes from other sets of data. So maybe if we were to link the failure rate for something like points or track circuits to relative humidity, which I don't think we do particularly, there might be some trends there. So that's setting up of the data. And then the other one, certainly I commend the data there, because in talking to the asset information team, things like the linear asset decision support tool, which is used for track, which is both input in from the train-borne and the staff out on site with pads, but also the benefit of a huge wealth of different lines of information coming for their particular section and length. So yes, I think it's a completely appropriate question and relevant in terms of the sifting and the use of the data for people to respond and to intervene better in terms of preventing and predicting delay. So thank you for the question.
Could I just ask that when you're asking a question, if you could just state your name and...
Sorry. Chris Norton. Chris Norton.
Thank you, Chris. Any more questions in the room?
Richard Shaw, Hema Cellar again. It's to do with the clarifications and questions, and obviously they would be then shared out amongst the other tenderers. Can you submit questions in confidence? Because obviously with it being innovation, there may be some intellectual property or ideas you want to clarify that you don't want to then be disseminated to others.
If you've got the process is that you'll be submitting a bid which articulates your proposition. So that's really the time to set down the specifics of your proposition. If you're asking, we're unable really to give. If you're asking us to give an opinion before submission of the tender as to whether your IP, your proposition fits or not, I think
it's to do with a specific one of the challenges, and as an organisation we are already investing time and effort into a solution which would be viable, but along with that there is actually some funding that we've been given as a grant, and I need to know how that stacks up as far as from a commercial point of view. So that's why.
Well, I think that probably could be cast as a generic question, which I probably can attempt an answer at now. If you've got, we will need to stay within state aid funding.
Absolutely,
rules.
yeah.
So if you have already had some funding from another state back fund or whatever, then we'll need to look at the aggregate of the funding that we might offer and that you might offer from the other source. So we would not be able to give you in aggregate more than the state aid rules would allow.
I fully appreciate that, but you understand the sentiment of my question really, where I'd like to explore how that works really.
But I think it is a generic. There may be others out there, and it'll be a generic answer to what is potentially a generic question. Because I think you're asking a generic question about how we would treat third-party funding.
I mean, we don't want the money to act, is what, obviously, yes, but I'll submit that.
Hi, I'm Andy Souter, University of Nottingham. Obviously, we're a university. We're interested in putting something forward to one of the feasibility studies. Do we need a commercial team with a commercial company?
I come back to the collaboration comment, and also the fact if you look at the evaluation criteria, I forget the exact term we use, but one of them is effectively deliverability. So what we're interested in is the ability to get your feasibility study to market. So I would suggest you would probably get a better evaluation if you've got a partner that can help you take the route to market.
Okay.
So it's a judgment you have to make in how you make your bid most attractive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Michael Lawrence from Magellium. A couple of questions on two different topics. First, on the data challenges. We've been doing some work collecting data from members of the public as part of a project with British Transport Police, and we'd like to take that further. Just wondered if data from the public falls into the remit of remote condition monitoring. You know, it's monitoring in some sense, but we'd need to focus it onto the challenges you have. But in principle, is kind of crowdsourced public data acceptable?
Absolutely. We have no preconceptions as to how the problem will be solved. We've stated, we've set out some problem statements. We're sort of agnostic as to how they're solved.
Okay, and
I would also add to that in terms of it's often the more improbable data sources that sometimes can be the ones that give you that breakthrough. The analogy that's sometimes been used is to predict with a fortnight's notice the onset of flu. You don't actually go to the National Health Service, you go to Google, because the number of searches on the word flu remedy tend to rocket a fortnight before people turn up at the surgeries. So yes, very interested in that approach. I suppose it's a pointer rather than a particular statistically significant source of information, but certainly in terms of the different take on it and some early predictors, I think it could be a very useful area to explore. Yes.
Okay. And in a very different field, also within the scope of our company, we're interested in whether you have any underwater assets where you need to see what's going on underwater. We have some other technology that might be useful for that from a different domain. So do you need to monitor under bridges and things? Is that any use to you?
Very much so. Not as part of this challenge, I suggest, although the drainage and flooding work stream would lend itself to some, and it won't lead solutions, but obviously telemetry would be one of the obvious ones. I suppose if it's outside this challenge, what the EIT remote condition monitoring process can promote is interaction with problem owners. So the geotechnical engineer, the performance people who are trying to run trains, the structures and civil engineers will be represented at these events. And so even if there isn't a conversation about this is relevant to a challenge, other conversations could take place. Scouring under structures, flooding events under bridges, the railway remains closed while and until you can get divers underneath them. So for that specific one, certainly the industry would place value on another and a quicker and a less difficult way of monitoring for sure. Yeah.
Can I just talk to those out there on the webinar and ask if you've got any questions, and if you could press return now. Okay, turning back to the room, more questions in the room?
Hello, I'm Clint Stiles from the University of Southampton. My question is more around the scope in Challenge 3, the alarms and warnings. We have some technology and expertise in remote condition monitoring of bearings, and I believe there are problems with bearings on trains. Is that out of scope because you're mainly looking at track and things like that, or would rolling stock infrastructure, is that part of?
We might need to log that as a formal question. Certainly on the face of it, it's the infrastructure measuring and it's the intelligent infrastructure system. But as you say, delays occur to rolling stock, delays occur to infrastructure causes, and as well as the causes, you've got the monitoring. So it's not just the infrastructure measuring the infrastructure, it's not just the trains measuring the trains. There's this cross-pollination of trains measuring the infrastructure and the infrastructure measuring the trains. So for example, we have acoustic and thermal measuring of where is going on with the infrastructure detects the trains. I think we would probably need to think about that and post a formal answer.
Okay.
The cross-pollination at the moment, the intelligent infrastructure system tends to monitor the infrastructure. I'll just look to Roy to see if we're capturing any train information on it, but I don't think we are, but it could be the potential. So I think we'll take that as an interesting and a difficult question and consider the response.
And you'll post an answer, will you?
We will post it.
Okay, thank you, thanks.
I can give part of an answer now. We went through a process to identify 10 questions, so those are the 10 questions that are the subject of this competition. But we run other competitions, and we also, there's the Enabling Innovation team, have an always open, what you might call suggestion box process called RISE, which is, I don't know what it stands for. Which is all about those things that don't fit in with one of our existing challenges. So if you were to look at our website, and this would also potentially apply to the underwater question earlier, if you could look at our websites, there's a downloadable form there, or you can contact us, and you could enter into that process for things that are outside our normal competitions.
Wow. Me again. Based on the 10 challenges, you've almost answered the question I was going to ask, but just to get confirmation on it, are the challenges going to be specific to the description? Because they can be as broad as you want them to be, and that is just going to elongate the whole process, and it's also going to make it difficult for other smaller size SMEs like us to be more specific on what our offering is going to be. So if you could clarify that, I think for everybody that would be good, because just in this room we've already started to go broad today, and if you go too far you'll end up with nothing.
Well, you'll see that in the evaluation, the question, as I said a minute ago, the questions were established by going through a process, and each of the questions has a challenge owner, a real person on the railway who wants that problem solving. So the challenges are the exam question, if you like. They're the things that we're looking to address. If you can only address it in part, then that won't position you as well as somebody who can address it in full.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're addressing a completely different question, then you're not going to score very well, because a big I think 25% of the weighting is towards is addressing the challenge.
Again, the specific reason I ask that is we've contributed a considerable amount of time through the whole of this process, and for it to then get broader and broader, and for our offering to be less and less, then it makes the time that we've already committed pretty pointless.
Which I understand, yeah. Which is why I reiterated the question. The 10 challenges are the challenges. That's what we're going to assess against. If people have got ideas beyond that, then there are other processes that we can use to talk about those ideas.
I think I'll probably just add to David's answer as well, and strengthen what he was saying. It's very much the outputs that we're looking at. To take the example of the trespass and vandalism on a specific piece of infrastructure in Bournemouth Depot, a solution that pretty much prevents graffiti attacks happening is the outcome. And then I suppose the other things around it are some of the solutions would be very expensive and have high recurring OPEX costs. There might be some simple things that cost very little but have the same outcome. So if there's a level playing field for those, it's the cheaper one that we need to give them.
Thank you. If no one else, I'm sorry if I'm hogging, please come forward. One of the areas we're interested in was Challenge 8, and I see what you're suggesting. It's a two-stage. It has to be for a feasibility study and then a demonstration project. How does that work with the proposal? Do we have to propose both? Is there a gateway after the feasibility that has to be successful? Can you advise what we actually tender for?
The way we would envisage it working is, as I said earlier, we'd be looking for you to give us a contractable proposal for the feasibility and an indicative proposal for the demonstration. Because clearly you can't know all the details, none of us can know all the details of what the demonstration might look like until we've done the feasibility. We would assess your proposal in the round based on those two pieces of information. if you were successful and we then ran the feasibility study, at the end of the feasibility study we would have a review and we would then decide whether or not we were taking forward the demonstrator.
So we would only be contracted just for the feasibility study for the avoidance of doubt, but then there was the possibility of going forward depending on the success of the feasibility.
And we would be negotiating to, if you were successful in your feasibility study, we would be negotiating with you around the terms of taking forward the demonstrator, but we would be benchmarking that on your original proposition at the time of tender.
But if we do, can we be assured that if the feasibility study is successful, we will be able to move into demonstration?
Well, it defines successful. It might be technically successful, but it might not offer a business case that's worth taking forward. So if it is both technically successful and appears to be sufficiently attractive to be worth taking forward because we can see the benefits that are going to come from it, then yes.
We've got a question come through the web, which actually is along the same theme of feasibility and demonstrator as well. I'll just read the question out. It's come from Rob Pinnock at TRW, and Rob is asking, please could you confirm which challenges you believe could be addressed by a single stage demo rather than going through an initial feasibility study stage? Was it 3, 5, 6 and 10? So I think that's probably there to reiterate.
I will turn to the right slide and confirm, and that's absolutely right. It's 3, 5, 6 and 10 are the projects that are the challenges rather that we think are amenable to going straight to a demonstrator.
So if you haven't the descriptions in front of you, item 3, which is straight to demonstrator, is how to detect and prevent potential safety risks using 27 high definition visibility of the network. Challenge 5 is the securitization of Bournemouth Depot. So in other words, how to secure the railway boundaries and monitor access gates. 6 is the voids work stream. So this is monitoring a complex set of S&C. Probably the host area is a complex junction in the Guildford area, monitoring for movement, pinpointing movement relative. And then item 10 was the signalling power and reliability. This is fairly mature technology, and we believe that that could go straight to a demonstrator for a solution that would resolve that particular issue.
I'm back again, sorry. The ones that you would prefer to do feasible, or let me rephrase that, I've briefly read the documents to now, not in great detail. If you have a prospective solution that you believe is beyond feasibility and could go direct to demonstration, I believe I read that that's not a problem in the invitation. You just put that down. Am I correct in thinking that, or the ones that you're looking for feasibility study before demonstration, you still want to go through that process?
I'm trying to find the words. I can't quite find them.
The reason.
You are right. The ones that we are assuming will be feasibility followed by demonstrator. If you can, as it were, demonstrate to us that you can go straight to demonstrator,
then so be it.
Then so be it.
The reason I ask is that we've already done a lot of feasibility with the university we're in collaboration with on one of the specific challenges, and we believe we can take that straight to demonstration. But it does ask for feasibility in the first instance.
I can't quite turn to it at the moment, but it does. The document does make that clear.
I thought it did. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
That may be worth putting up on the list of questions on the website, actually.
We can draw it out to be absolutely crystal clear. Any more questions on the web? Yes, there is.
So Neil Roddis from TVG Manufacturing has asked the question, is there any prospect of technology developed in this programme finding application outside the UK? And that's quite an interesting question, and my off-the-cuff comment is, in the one hand, the UK perhaps might lag the rest of the world, given organisational difficulties. On the other side of the coin, it might lead in terms of the way the industry is set up is specialised. So rolling stock leasing companies companies specialise in reliable, interoperable trains. Network Rail's track function specialises in trying to get the amount of rail bogus defects top of line down to an absolute minimum. And I suppose examples of things like the new measurement train are actively being looked at by other railway administrations. So I think that's a very interesting question, and I give a complex answer in response. David, I don't know if you would have a response to the question as well.
I'll try a simpler answer. I think the simple answer is yes. The railway is the UK railway is by no means unique. We probably have some greater challenges than some of the other railways, and I would suggest that if we can solve some of these challenges in the UK, then I think there's a market for worldwide. Because certainly the challenges are not unique; they're transferable. So I think if we can find a solution to the challenges, and by running a demonstrator and hopefully potentially that then justifying further rollout, then I think that's a great shop window for UK PLC.
So good for your ROI. So good for your ROI.
Yes, as somebody in the audience has pointed out, yes, if it would help our return on investment, which, as I say, we are interested in getting product to market as much as you are. We have another question from the web from Richard Shenton, RDS Intel International, that perhaps is .com. For challenge 3, high definition visibility, we indicated that you wish to use forward-facing cameras. Can you provide access to or information on these systems to understand how we can best interface with them?
Yes.
Do you want to deal with that?
That is a completely legitimate and relevant question, and there will clearly be protocols about the footage that is captured. In the invitation to tender, we have supplied, or can supply on request, a file of the existing captured CCTV. It happens to be some footage taken of the Brockenhurst to Lymington Town branch. It's not a very desperately exciting piece of footage. It's a piece of rural railway, but giving the sort of impression of the footage. We will need to work closely with our problem owner and with fleet colleagues to define the protocols on the chosen fleet. I think we will probably log that as a question to say which specific train fleet, which manufacturer we will provide the access to. But it is a key question, and one obviously we'll need to work through with the interested suppliers to hack into that data, to understand the systems that we use and the potential with the technology to process it and post-process it in some way. So thank you for that question. It's highly relevant.
So, just to be clear then, Richard, we'll take that one away, and first of all, our assumption has been that bidders would be able to understand, would be able to look at the downloaded video footage which we've provided, or can provide, I should say, and would be able to advise us what their or bid on what their capability was to make value, to extract additional value from that footage. But what the challenge is from Richard Shenton is for us to go away and think about how we can actually get you access to the hardware that footage comes from. Okay? Right. Was any more questions in the room? Just picking up that point about data, we have offered several data sets to bidders, including the video data set. Those are available on submission and acceptance of a non-disclosure agreement. We have a number of people have submitted them, and we are imminently about to issue to those people that have given us NDAs, 10 I believe. We're about to issue the actual data out. But if anybody else out there needs access to that data, then please get your NDAs in. Okay.
I'm not asking any more questions. I'm sorry to hog it, but it may help other people as well. Can we make reasonable assumptions about what access we would have to trains or vehicles? In our case, one of the projects we're looking at is actually mounting on South West trains or their remote conditioning monitoring trains, or whatever it is. Do we just make assumptions about what we may be able to do, or do we need to liaise with them in some way?
I think you should make assumptions, but you should make assumptions on the basis that we have a good relationship with South West Trains, and they're part funding this. So providing your proposal, on the assumption that your proposal is ranking highly in the assessment, then we would be attaching sufficient value to it to find a way of demonstrating it.
Does the specific question also perhaps need to be directed to the challenge owner? And if we get one or more questions about could we have access to a body end cabinet on a class 450 unit, perhaps we could facilitate something like that. So I suppose that the answer is it depends, but by communication we will, if necessary, offer that.
So how do we arrange that? Sorry, so how do we actually arrange that, Richard? I mean, what needs to happen?
The question up in the first instance, and then specifying the need for that particular level of access, I think.
So if we had a level of demand from bidders that said, please give us access to a typical unit, then we would seek to arrange that. Whether or not we can do that in conjunction with the visit to Bournemouth Depot.
We wouldn't probably do it in the timescale for that, but what we would probably do if we had the questions is do a follow-up, and that again would work quite well. But I think we would state it on the basis that this is a call over a training visit rather than one or two we might just have the chance, but we probably set it up formally as suggested. But yes, that opportunity might exist.
Okay, any more questions in the room or indeed on the web? Any more for anyone last call? The web 30 seconds to respond. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well, thank you very much both for those in the room here in London, and also to those out there who've joined in through the webinar. Thank you very much for your interest in this programme. Get your thinking caps on. We're looking forward to some really interesting proposals. Thank you for your time this afternoon.